now she's focused on her practice in London School of UMA Architecture. And by the way, I would also like to say that tomorrow's lecture is cancelled. The only one. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for inviting me to talk. Just want to take you through some of the work that we're doing. Our practice is called You and Me Architecture. I wanted to show you some of our kind of collaborations and work that we've done in our practice and talk to you about some of the processes that we've worked on and how we work. The practice is actually myself and Iris Papadatu, so there's two of us. And the way we work is that we kind of, I guess we actually studied, we met in degree, and we then also went to the RCA together, the Royal College of Art, and we've always had quite a shared interest in architecture, kind of playful architecture, but also like the interface between public art, the street, and like public realm, and also architecture. And we've always been interested in that kind of scale of almost like small architecture, big furniture. So we actually set up, it's kind of, when we were at the RCA, we started doing a few projects, kind of speculative projects, and also some of our kind of self-initiated projects, and then did start teaching here a couple of years ago, so I was doing part-time. In the last year or so, been doing our own work full-time. So we're quite a new practice, and we started working with more kind of public bodies, which has been quite exciting. I think as a small practice, it's really easy to get into doing residential work, and we've kind of tried not to get into too much residential work and do more public work, just because that's what we enjoy. Before You and Me, I was a project architect with Carl Turner, project architect on his house. He taught here a couple of years ago, the same time I was here. And also project architect with Will Alsop, working on a lot of kind of school projects. And then Iris, some of practice, that trying to work that Iris did in practice, working at Featherstone Young. They do a lot of public projects, and this is like a homeless shelter and bicycle repair workshop. The top image is the Sunshine Disabled Centre, and also a rape and crisis centre. And this is some sort of furniture for CSM, Central St Martin's. I think what we've kind of taken from the projects that we did there, working for Will Alsop and Sarah, is this kind of like colourful playfulness and a kind of approach to working, which is quite inclusive. We work a lot of kind of the end users. So this is the kind of work that we do in our practice. We work a lot on high streets, working a lot in Tottenham and Barking in London, and also doing a lot of kind of installation and artworks. And I'll run you through a few kind of projects. This is Iris. Our practice is, just thought to put the slide up because we're slightly different, or maybe not so different anymore, but Iris lives full-time in Greece, and she works remotely, and she comes to London probably for a week, every sort of 6 weeks. So it's quite, and I'm in London full time. All our projects are in London, and just the two of us, and we both work from our homes. So it's quite interesting to show you that you can actually have a small practice working from home with a laptop. You don't really need that much to set up these days. And also with the internet and cheap travel, you know, it's quite amazing. People are like, is Iris still living in Greece? And I'm like, yeah, there she is, and she comes here for client meetings. So it's quite an interesting, slightly different kind of office dynamic that we have, doing a lot of work remotely, pointing lots to Skype. So just to take you through some work that we've done on London high streets, you may be aware that the Mayor of London, and generally throughout England, there's been a kind of bit of a downturn in high streets. I know that a lot of kind of projects, a lot of studios often sort of address high streets, what's the future of them, where they're going. There's a lot of vacant units. I think, for example, London Road is a project that we got shortlisted for. There's a Mary Porter's project just around the corner, a lot of vacant units trying to kind of regenerate high streets. And this kind of word regeneration is quite interesting because also there's a lot of debate about it, because some of the work that we're doing is in Tottenham, and we've been having a lot of workshops with local residents, and we are kind of effectively working on the improvement of the appearance of high streets, but then people are also quite anti that as well. It's kind of regeneration versus gentrification. You know, obviously the nicer something gets, the more desirable it is, the more maybe small businesses can't afford to have these kind of rents. So I think these are kind of big questions which are happening at the moment and people are talking about. So specifically the work that we're doing, we did 10 shops in Barking and we're working on 30 shops in Tottenham. And we were asked by the council to, in Tottenham, basically there's a really big geographical area, and we got asked to look at this kind of very large high street area and to propose where we're going to improve 30 shops, and also come up with a lot of different suggestions about the high street, you know, like how can you improve the high street, what are the issues on the high street. There's a lot of kind of bigger issues on high streets like clutter, advertising, things like, I actually never really was that aware about Leica Mobile. I don't know if you've come across it, you go down the high street, it seems like every single shop these days does look the same, because Leica Mobile is basically paying the shopkeepers money to advertise their signs, and they get a sign for free as well as some rent, to advertise Leica Mobile. So it means that actually high streets are really interesting places, and they've got these individual businesses, and isn't it great that you've got all these kind of thriving businesses which aren't chains, but then they're all starting to become looking a bit like this, where, you know, okay, maybe this is extra large, new way shop, and there's another shop, but they're all kind of starting to look the same. So there's kind of bigger questions that we're addressing on the high street, and they're kind of big conversations, because you can't ban someone who's kind of advertising, and there's kind of bigger issues which are being addressed. Things like as well, like pavement overspill, a lot of shops which own their forecourts, and how do you kind of address those and kind of appearance of high streets, billboards. And I really love this image. It's actually by a Polish artist, Kowalska, and it's just an image of a high street in Poland which has been blanked out for all the advertising. And I think it's quite evocative. Same time, we don't want to go back to having no advertising. You know, it's kind of an interesting question, like what? So much clutter happening. And as part of the work that we're doing in Tottenham, the council are also doing this kind of good design guide. So they're producing a document for the shopkeepers to kind of give a guidance in terms of what is good design and what is bad design. And it's quite a difficult thing, because it's, you know, good design is quite subjective, but it's kind of general principles like not trying to clutter up your windows too much, things like the sizes of your fascias, like this really large fascia. You know, often I think there is this kind of slight tendency to have more signage and more information, more, and actually less is more sometimes. So we were employed by the council to look at 10 shops in Barking and 10 shops in Tottenham. So we were employed by Tottenham and Barking to kind of look at some businesses and trying to give them new signs and new window displays. And so quite kind of bottom up, you know, like quite small budgets we're talking about, to try and improve the appearance of high streets. And one of the things that we were quite keen on is to try and get the shopkeepers as involved in this process as possible, to really kind of engage the local shopkeepers, because at the end of the day we're designing a shop for them, so rather than going away and just giving them a generic sign, we really wanted to give them something which was really specific to their business. And in terms of our approach as well, we really feel that the high street is this kind of really fantastic grouping of lots of different individual businesses, and we didn't want to just give everyone a really generic sign. So we actually gave the shopkeepers disposable cameras, got them to photograph shops that they liked along the high street, colours they liked. So we kind of got all this kind of information from the individual shopkeepers before doing the design, handing out leaflets, seeing who was interested. These are just some photographs of some of the shops, some of the shopkeepers, kind of information. You know, some people, and I think it's something to say, you know, so in Tottenham we've got effectively working for the council, but then we've got 30 clients, 30 shopkeepers that we're trying to design a shop for each one. And some of the shopkeepers are really open to us as designers coming up with ideas. Some shopkeepers are very specific about what they want and what they don't want. So sometimes you have the opportunity to design really something fantastic. Sometimes you design something which you're really pleased with, and then through several kind of meetings it gets changed so much that you end up with something quite not as exciting as you wanted it originally to be. So I think it's also quite a challenge, I think. And the way in Barking, just to make you aware, the shopkeepers got given this kind of design service and the new signs for free. So they signed up for this programme and then they got their shops redone. So it's quite a good incentive for them. Although some people are also very sceptical. It's kind of funny. You say, oh no, it's all going to be for free. And then they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not too sure. So it's kind of trying to also get people involved. So working quite closely with the shopkeepers, more standard things like questionnaires, and then things like, you know, forming quite close relationships with shopkeepers, then texting us all sorts of information that they want on their boards. And this is one shop that we did, and I think this is a Photo Express shop down in Barking. I think what was really nice about this shop is that often with high streets, if you look up, there's some really beautiful architecture, because there's this kind of like datum of kind of mess and colour and information, you never really look up. So our approach here was to, this is the before and that's the after, our approach here was really to kind of take some of the ornamentation from the top window and bring it down to create a kind of window into the shop, and also working on this existing red and white colour scheme. And then also then taking that through to the front of the shop and doing up the front of his shop. And having this idea that, because it's a photo shop, actually using his the front of his shop as a kind of gallery or an exhibition, because he actually provides a whole list of services, including photo restoration, so we thought it would be actually quite nice to have some sort of historical photos and use that as a kind of almost like a public front to the shop. And that's Jimmy, who's the shopkeeper. He was actually a fantastic guy, and he was a brilliant client, because he just said, you know, just do what you want. Which is actually quite rare, because this is someone's business, and a lot of people have a very kind of strong things about what they want. So he was kind of really open, and his whole window was all boarded up, so he never even used to have any daylight into his shop. So it was quite a big transformation. This is another shop, which was a news and wine shop, and a lot of these kind of estate agent shops have all this kind of clutter outside their shops, like milk crates and micromobile and bubblegum machines and various things, and we kind of just wanted to really kind of try and make sense of that a bit more, using this idea of topography and text and kind of news. So kind of looking at these individual objects and thinking about kind of letters and whether these kind of objects can start to spell out words. We like this idea that this shop was called News and Wine. We had this idea that we quite wanted it to be spell out the word wine, and then at night time you twiddle a letter around, and then it'd be news, and then you just get a little extra, and it's like wine at night. But you know, obviously who's going to do that? So then there was a series of kind of different telecom boxes which were also painted as part of that project. And then that was kind of the before and after, so actually starting to plan these objects and sort of make sense of things like this, which are always falling down. So quite like, you know, sort of kind of like the crossover, quite a lot of just graphics and coming up with new signage, and then also there was the kind of shutter artwork involved. And just kind of going to something quite bold and simple. This is the shop in Tottenham, just to show you a different approach, which was actually a really beautiful shop front itself. And the approach here was to be quite kind of sensitive of it and to kind of reinstate it, have it kind of, you know, some of the original features, reinstate the Victorian tiles, whilst giving it a kind of new look as well. It was called Diamond Clippers and Barber Shop, so playing this idea of like mirrored vinyl. And these are some work in progress shots that hasn't been finished. And we're actually working with a really fantastic traditional sign writer, so it's been really amazing to work with Michael, who does these kind of amazing, you know, you kind of sketch something out and he just draws it like this and chalks it all out. So it's been really fantastic to work. Often, you know, when you design something, you draw the sketch and then you have to like put it into Illustrator, make it all vectorize it so that it can be cut by a vinyl cutter. So it's been really nice to kind of work with someone who's more directly kind of painting on a large scale. And then just to kind of really show you a few other shops which are really taking inspiration from the shop products themselves. This idea, there's kind of hairdressers, all these kind of African fabric shops, there's an African grocery shop as well, and taking inspiration from their products to display and kind of make kind of window displays based on that. So this was new concept hairdressing, so taking this idea of kind of pattern and working through different schemes And actually, initially there was quite a big proposal to do a kind of floor graphic, which then got pared back because conservation, it's in a conservation area. And then working through kind of working drawings, taking the initial Photoshop sketch and then drawing that up, and kind of setting out drawings for the new concept shop. And then we've got one shot of it. This is still not finished, but just a sort of photograph in situ. And this is actually a shop in Barking, which we did, which I think is quite an interesting question because we're designers, and we've been asked to design some shop fronts. But if you design a shop front which is too fancy, you also do alienate some of the clientele. So it's quite a challenge. You know, if you make a pound shop look too, Farrow and Ball and conservation and beautiful, you know, if I was wanting to go buy some cheap products on the high street, I probably wouldn't go there. So it's like a kind of toss-up and quite a kind of interesting challenge. So here, this is the idea that he actually has all these existing, you know, sort of fluorescent stars. They're just kind of using them really oversized and big to create a kind of new shop site. Then this is just another shop, herbs and acupuncture shop. So kind of again using the products to try and create a window graphic, which isn't, the window graphic costs like £600 or something, so kind of relatively cheap costs to kind of really sort of have quite a big impact on the street. And I thought this was quite nice actually because this is the shop in Barking and this is their branch in Bethnal Green. And I was walking past their Bethnal Green shop the other day and I was like, oh, they've ripped off our graphics. So that was brilliant because that's actually a great example of what this whole project is about. It's the fact that like we as designers get paid to do someone's shop front and then they really like that and use that as improving another one of their shops down the road. So it's just a kind of idea of like legacy and the kind of whole idea of the project is also trying to inspire other shopkeepers and other branches to kind of use the graphics. So this was, I said to them, oh, that's brilliant that you've actually reused some of our graphics in your other shops. So that was kind of quite nice. It's like very small, kind of bottom up, but actually how it can have a bigger impact on the high street. And the other thing, we've actually got this blog that we set up. I think it's tumblr.tottenhamshopfronts.com. tottenhamshopfronts.tumblr.com. Because one of the other parts of the project, as well as working with the local businesses who are getting these improvements, it's also trying to work with the community and the kind of people who live in the area to make them aware that the government is investing money into their local high street to try and improve it. So one of the things that we've been doing is doing a lot of kind of talks. There's a blog to kind of keep people updated on the process, and also doing workshops. These are some workshops done in the past where we've actually done kind of not 1-to-1, but 1-to-20 large drawings. And as part of this Tottenham shopfront improvement project, we're also proposing like a Tottenham artwork trail. So there are kind of quite a lot of kind of existing artworks and graffitis and kind of things of interest along the high street. So we thought it'd be great to kind of actually produce a map to somehow link these together, and also a key node. So this is the entrance of the West Green Road in Tottenham, to have some additional kind of artworks. So we've been working with the local residents to do a kind of large patchwork map of West Green Road, kind of collaging in different sort of patterns which are taken from photographs from the kind of local shops, and to kind of develop that into an artwork which is going to be implemented on the corner of one of the shop units. So we're taking this idea of kind of maps and pattern and kind of gridding it to abstract it. And I think like games and different types of representing and ways of representing things is something that we are really interested in. This is a project that Iris did years ago, but it was the kind of idea of having how to kind of represent a project, an architecture project, in a different way than a kind of typical A1 board. I think architecture, to architects, architecture is understandable just about, but if you have like a public consultation and you have an A1 board with all this information on, something that's quite difficult to engage the local community and make it more interesting and decipherable. So the idea of kind of like games or doing things in different mediums is something that we're kind of quite excited about and that we do quite a lot in our work. This is a project that we did while we were at the Royal College of Art, and it was a collaboration between, we did a call out for different architects and designers and anyone, jewellery designers, writers, to submit hats inspired by London. And then we had those hats and we had an exhibition in a shop window. And I think this is quite an interesting example of how you self-initiate projects as a young practice. We did this 2010, so 5 years ago. We were at the RCA. We thought, oh, it'd be really great to do some more projects. We want to do more public projects. We'd love to do more kind of artwork-based projects. We'd love to do more kind of exhibition design. So we thought, okay, let's just do an exhibition in, a friend of ours had a shop, in the shop, and do a call out online, do the call outs. Then we got all these amazing hats from all over the world, from like America we had one from some people from the RCA, we had all these hats arrived, and then we had an exhibition. And there wasn't really that much to it. We did a kind of big map of London on the window, but it kind of got us a project. It got us our first project. So I think one of the things is when you step on your own, you don't really want to use other people's projects that you've worked. Still really want to put Will Alsop's projects on my website because okay, I've worked on them, but they're not my projects. So you need to kind of develop in a way like a portfolio of work. And so I think doing self-initiated projects in the direction you want to go is one way of doing it. However small they are, you can kind of make more of them. And this is another self-initiated project we did. It was actually a vacant unit. We got the kind of brief to do a pop-up shop for the royal wedding, and it was in Sloane Square. So all the shops, it's right by Saatchi Gallery, this Duke of York shopping complex, and all the shops are all quite kind of, they're quite established. You've got like Joseph, and you've got like Zara, and you've got all the kind of very sort of smart Chelsea kind of Sloane Square shops. So we had this vacant unit, and we wanted to transform it, and we had this idea of like the wedding veil as a concept. So we did a kind of suspended a gigantic veil from the ceiling, and then we kind of transformed the shop temporarily for I think it was for 3 weeks, and it was a pop-up hat shop. And that was the kind of, we did a series of talks around that. And we also involved, I think the kind of making process became quite important because it's like in this place where you don't really see, it's all about sanitised environment. It's kind of like slightly shopping mall-y and it's very kind of clean. So we spent ages doing this huge veil in the window and got quite a lot of interest just from sort of passers-by, and that kind of process of building it became sort of quite fun and quite kind of interactive. And this is just a project that we did, which was last year. It was in Portobello Road for kind of performance art festival, where the brief was to design a series of kind of like furniture pieces, which could be used as kind of performance pieces, where kind of art, kind of performance art could happen around them. So we had this idea of a kind of abstracted house with different parts of the, so there's the living room, the bedroom, the garden, the study, which is kind of scattered across the site. And we worked with Zoe Fudge, who she used to teach here as well actually. She's an artist and an architect. And she had made these kind of really beautiful kind of exploded houses, models and drawings, and we kind of used that as inspiration to kind of make this large extended house on the site. These are some Brighton students. I don't know if you remember them. We did a lot of, the whole project was, no one was being paid for it, and it was everyone was just volunteering and chipping in and making. And it was a really fun 2 weeks when we didn't really know what we were going to end up with to start with. And this was like, kind of had this idea of kind of white frames, this kind of skeletons, like a study, kind of living room area. This was a double bed, which was used for kind of performances, and there's kind of outdoor seats. And there's some kind of images that are being used. And it's actually similar to a project that I did with Carl Turner when we were working together, which is also based on the idea of a house, an exploded house in an exhibition. also where it was an exhibition about British housing. So we kind of used the iconic form of a house and then had that kind of coming together to create a house form, and then it kind of spread apart amongst the gallery space. It was in a design museum in Lisbon, and the gallery itself was a bit like a design museum in London, where it was all kind of very nice, but it was all quite precious. You know, there was a kind of scooter on a plinth and an Eames chair, and it wasn't very interactive. So we kind of had the idea of making you feel more at home when you're in the gallery. So there was a kind of kitchen table where you could eat your picnic. There was a bed that you could lie in. There was a kind of individual reading room where you could read books about housing. And these were kind of some drawings that I did to kind of explain the concept and kind of interaction. I think one of the things that we're really keen is this kind of idea of interactive design where you can sort of play and have fun. And this was a 1 to 10 model, I think, that we developed. It was a project which was run by the Architecture Foundation, which Carl, it was a call out and we kind of went for it. And there was a kind of idea to come up with a design to do an exhibition based on British housing in Portugal. So a model was done and we did kind of a lot of development for the pitch. And these are some of the drawings. Components. There was a kind of stair which you could go in and climb inside and peep out the top, and then kind of blackboard wall. That was the place where you could sort of sit and have your packed lunch. A kind of individual commode stroke love seat. A kind of front room stroke sofa, and then a kind of bed where you can kind of listen to music. And these were then like populated with domestic objects. So there was a kind of washing up bowl. So this is then in the space. So just to run through, just to run through another project which was also a large kind of art installation that we got shortlisted for, but we didn't win the project. But it was this commission for Arab engineers who invited young and kind of up-and-coming practices to create a large-scale installation based around the idea of people at the core. So the kind of concept for that was to have this idea of the kind of old-fashioned telephone, and the kind of recorded listening is the idea of connecting different floors in the kind of large office space, because they're engineers and they've kind of got several floors and they're a really big company, but they don't often speak to each other. So the idea was that you could actually go and sit in one of these kind of like fabric pods and actually connect up to somebody here on a picnic table or somebody else in these kind of various spaces. So this is just a series of kind of like moments really showing how these kind of large scale is kind of pendant kind of lights could work. Because I think the space at the moment was it's kind of bottom right hand corner, it's very kind of cold, very kind of not very domestic, not very friendly, so the idea was to introduce some colour from this. And we worked very closely, it was a picture of Millimeter, who were a really great contractor who did a lot of like follies, trap structures, and we kind of collaborated with them and pitched in with them. I mean, something that I didn't really talk about was just to kind of briefly talk about you and me, our work, why we call them you and me. We're actually just a really small core team, and we collaborate a lot with other people on different projects. So whether it's an artist or a builder, I mean, as architects do, you know, we're never really the ones who produce everything. You know, we are kind of facilitators, and I think that's something that we're really excited about, like working with other people more and more, and actually collaborating rather than it being us employing someone. Actually, why not on all projects try and like work directly with someone with kind of equal collaboration? So this is the last project. Just wanted to show you a completely different context. Doing some work in Doha in Qatar in the Middle East, and there was an open invitation for people to say whether they would be interested in a 2-week exchange program which was happening in Doha. The idea being is that 5 architecture teams in England would be paired up with 5 architecture teams in Doha, and we'd actually look at this part of the city, which is currently, there aren't very many plans for it. So part of it was kind of an ideas competition with a lot of the planning authority from there being involved to try and come up with some ideas and alternative futures for this huge site, which is actually all the way back to here. Here, under development at the moment, is like one of the biggest building sites in the world. It's a huge, massive bit of downtown Doha, Qatar, which has been basically completely flattened, any kind of architecture, buildings or anything, and a lot of people were living there before. It's been flattened, and then like 5 levels of car parking have been put in, and the whole thing's been redeveloped with a master plan by Eliza Morrison and David Ajay and several other kind of Western practices. Which is actually quite, I mean, the proposals themselves are quite interesting because they are much more lower scale than some of the other development which happened maybe about 5-10 years ago in Doha, which is much more kind of Dubai-like skyscrapers in the middle of the desert with no public realm. So I think Doha is quite aware that it's been developing very, very fast. I mean, it's a nomadic country. Some of the buildings here are probably like 50 years old. So in a way, why preserve them if they're old? You know, they're not actually of very much architectural merit. But so the question was, and there's been a scheme for here. So the question was, what do we do with this part of the site? Do we develop it? Do you keep it? Do you develop it in parts? So there was a kind of whole ideas competition based around that. And what was really a great opportunity actually, it was a bit like being a student again. Kind of, you know, when you teach, well, you know, but when you teach and you set these kind of briefs for your students, it's always great and you're kind of really into it, but you're never doing them. So what was really nice here, it was a bit like being a student. For 2 weeks we went to Doha, we had Ala and Fatima were our Qatari counterparts, and we had 2 weeks to come up with a design for this area. And so we were all kind of running around, interviewing, GoPro, sketching, you know, all that stuff, and it was a really great opportunity to kind of try and get under the skin of this place, which we are no way experts, and that's what's really nice, that we got invited to participate as a kind of cultural exchange, working really closely with Fatima and Ala, who know the area, and there were some things that, you know, I think you can be quite idealistic sometimes, and you're like, oh, everyone should just walk, you don't need cars, but you know, it's sort of 40-degree heat that you have to deal with, but also 6 months of the year, the heat is much lower, so it's also kind of trying to get around change or adapt the way people are used to kind of living in cities here. There's a new metro going in which will really change the way the place will be used. And the other thing that, I don't think Qatar's been a lot in the news about human rights and bribery and all sorts of things. It's kind of quite a strange place, a lot of things happening. And this site is actually almost entirely inhabited by by blue-collar men working mainly Pakistani, Nepali, Indian origin, who are basically working for hardly any money on these large construction sites. So it's effectively, the area is a bit of a slum, and it's very political, and I think it was, you know, it's such a big question, like, do you, and as architects we should be thinking about that, you know, like, what do you do with the people who live here? Do you, I think the immediate thing is, as an architect, you normally, you know, my first thing is you go to a site and you talk to the people who are there and see what they want. But then there's this place which is all entirely populated by immigrant workers who, if this place gets redeveloped, are going to get pushed out. And what does this area become, or what are the kind of larger questions, or how do you improve working conditions? So as part of our proposal, we were looking at like improving the conditions for the workers there and doing temporary housing. But it's also quite interesting again because in Qatar, everything is connected back to the government. So this project was actually run by Shared Properties, which are a big developer who's developing that site next door, who's also owned by the Sheikh, who's also sponsoring us being there. So we were going out there, having a lot of conversations with immigrant workers, set up a blog, but we also kind of, basically, some things we were told not to publish on the blog because they were too contentious politically. So, but it's really, so it's kind of, it puts you in a sort of difficult position, but it's answering the questions like where, you know, what do you do as an architect, what's your responsibility, what's your social responsibility, the ideas that you come up with. This was just a slide showing how our proposal for the project really looked at the local vernacular, and this was just a series of kind of images of thinking about future residents for the areas, whether it's the workers or international researchers or artists or Qatari students. So I think that just to kind of not go into it too much really, but we kind of had this idea for the site to really work with the local vernacular, this idea of the courtyard, and using the courtyard at different scales, and the courtyard house, and having a series of different sort of approaches to the courtyard house, and working with the existing, and this idea of like cutting and filling, whether you keep an existing house and then you start to wrap around a new element, or whether you cut it through to create a thoroughfare, or do you demolish a whole existing courtyard house to create a kind of walled garden, or do you cut a corner to create a new entrance, or do you demolish something entirely but use like a footprint of what used to be there? Because we are very interested in this idea of the like, I think what's really, even though the buildings themselves aren't that old, there's a real kind of value to the collective whole and the kind of street pattern and the kind of Middle Eastern, the way that their position is really narrow sikas is kind of really traditional and much more kind of sustainable in terms of the north-south winds, in terms of kind of overshading. So the approach was to create like a series of courtyards on a larger scale, where that top left image shows how do you redevelop the site whilst retaining and working with some of the existing, but also making it financially viable. So the proposal was to kind of re-densify the edge with a lot of new build to make that kind of quite high, so that some of the lower areas could be retained, and then a series of kind of like high developments around courtyards. So just the plan showing some of the kind of master plan, this idea of developing the courtyards within the site. So that's the new development happening here. And introducing the programme of education as a catalyst. Education from adult education, from primary schools, from the idea of kind of heritage trail to sports and recreation. Because I think what's interesting about Doha in particular, it's trying to rebrand itself as a kind of international cultural hub, because it's realising that all its money is from gas, but that's going to run out in 50 years. So they're trying now to invest a lot of money using the money they've got from gas to try and make this place a new cultural centre, so that they can invest a lot of money in education, a huge amount of money in culture, so inverted commas. Because I think it's interesting, the approach there as well is they have built this huge, amazing campus outside the town where they've got UCL, Qatar, they've got Virginia, Qatar, they've got all these kind of international universities are set up. They've got kind of amazing international architects with Zaha and everything, building Damien Hirst installations, building all these kind of cultural hubs, but they're always on the edge of the town, somewhere where you can drive to, somewhere you can go to. Or there's also Qatar Cultural Village, which is again amazing, huge and fantastic installation by Richard Serra, the artist. But again, they're kind of like removed and put on the edge of town, you know, rather than like having the classic kind of university town within the city, which kind of brings all that kind of richness into a place and also makes a place not die. You know, I think it's interesting, this whole idea about cities and donut cities and people living on the edges more rather than the centre. So just to summarise, on that project, we won that competition, which was an ideas competition, and now we've got some money from the British Council and the Qatar Museums Authority to implement some of our ideas that we had in this kind of larger master plan on a smaller scale. So what we are doing in October is proposing a small kind of heritage cultural trail which links the main kind of active part of the city, which is only like 2 seconds walk up here. And so there'll be a series of kind of installations along the route. And these are just some kind of very quick images and collages of kind of the idea of very small kind of bottom-up installations, which actually starts And the whole idea is to try and change the attitude towards this kind of part of town, especially for Qataris. So it's quite a big challenge. I mean, a lot of questions that we are talking about, people go, how are you going to get Qatari people to even come for this 1 week event? So we're just trying to tap into existing talks and lectures and program series which are happening to try and have them on the site. So that's kind of where that project is at the moment. So thank you. Sorry, that's quite a lot to take in. So I hope there's kind of some idea of like the different types of projects we do. Kind of they're architecture, but they're kind of quite exhibition based, art installation based. So if anyone's got any questions.
You talk a lot about architects' responsibilities and about a sensitive approach towards regenerations of an area. How much of a real impact do you think you have as an architect? Or have you got an example when it actually worked? You said that more sensitive approach and when it failed because the developer said more.
Well, I think Tottenham is a big place where a lot of money is being put in at the moment after the riots. The whole set of regeneration fund from the Mayor of London which is going in, and that's something that we don't yet know how it's going to change, but inevitably really putting money into it is going to pump up the prices. So that's somewhere where I don't have the answer. I don't know what's going to happen. We should like watch that space. I think you know, in terms of where it's worked on even like tiny projects like that tiny herb and acupuncture shop where someone else has decided to redo a shop front, or the place down the road in Tottenham which is redoing their shop front because they saw one of the shop fronts being redone on a really small scale. I think on a larger scale, I mean hopefully the street will look better and people will kind of value the more the kind of independence of each individual shop. But I also think there is a big question because all the, you know, like I said, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but like all the questions, all the small businesses are really worried that they're not going to be able to afford their rents. You know, and that's why there are a lot of vacant shops on the high street because the owners, which are generally often not the council and private owners, they would rather not rent their shop rather than rent. They'd rather wait and rent for money. So that's a kind of classic example where the high street is slightly failing and there are all these vacant units which aren't being used. And I don't know if there's kind of a way of doing like a rent control, or if there's a way around, or a way around that which comes kind of from higher up. But it's the same thing about buying a property. You know, it's the same. You want to try and buy a property as a Londoner, and it's kind of impossible to buy it there because the kind of international developers or people are going in and buying up. I think we can. You know, I think we can. I think it's difficult to make changes, and I think a lot of changes as architects are kind of the discussions that come up. So I think, for example, Doha is a really good example of there are these wider discussions which are happening, and people are starting to look at this area in a different way. And that's not just because of this ideas competition. There was the Qatar Museums Authority and Qatar are looking as a whole, how do we regenerate in a different way to how we regenerated before. And I think our competition is just like one tiny little stepping stone. You know, so I think it's all these stepping stones that hopefully will make a difference. But it's a challenge. You know, it's kind of, it's also really depressing when you're working really hard on something. Like Doha is a really good example. Like we've all been working really hard with the Qatari and Fatima and Ala to try and, we've tried to implement some of our master plans, some of the bigger ideas, and you're just faced up against a brick wall because the local authority was so difficult to get in touch with and they're so insular. As soon as they open it up, then it becomes too open and then they don't have the control. So when we went back in May to the site, half of the site was completely evacuated with lots of hoarding, with buildings being demolished. So like it's difficult because you're working on something and then it changes, but it's also a real eye-opener because in England, if you want to get the tiniest thing changed, you have to go through planning and conservation, all these different processes, which is good and bad. But in Doha, like, you know, you blink and it's gone. You know, it's a lot faster, but it's also the reality. And how precious do we need to be? Are we being too precious? You know, as well. I don't know. It's like, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask, when is the Qatar 1 week installation thing going to happen?
That's scheduled for November at the moment this year.
Yeah.
We don't have. We're supposed to have a Skype meeting with the Qatar girls on Saturday, actually, to finalise it to date. But it's scheduled for November.
Okay.
Because it's actually, we wanted to do it last October, and then because we were trying to implement some larger ideas which didn't happen, now we've kind of downsized to this kind of smaller installation. But also you need to think about the weather, so then it's a kind of window gap, because you have to do it suddenly any time after April until October. You know, it's if you want to do anything out on the street, it's a kind of no-no, because it's just you forget about the fact that it's like 45-degree heat.
Yeah, no, it's because I live there as well, so I'm familiar with, with the area.
Have you been to that area?
Yeah. So there was just a couple of points I'd like to raise just by the reason why you were saying that some of the Qatar Foundation and Education City are towards the outskirts is because they're trying to expand Doha, because Doha is like the first city, and there's Wakra and a couple of like neighboring cities, but literally there's Qatar, which is like that, and you just have Doha, and everything else is still desert. So by expanding outwards, they kind of get people to circulate further out as well, just to kind of get the other areas more involved. So that's why they're kind of expanding outwards, because it's so congested right now.
Yeah, because everybody drives, obviously because of the weather as well, and
and like the time frame for weather-wise, it literally is so dependent on that, because you have August is like 50+ degree weather, so you have from around October to April where people can actually walk outside. So I think doing installations and outdoor activities at that time really gets people involved.
No, but I think that's a really good. I think it's a really good thing to raise, this idea of like spreading the city and how do you expand the city. I just personally sometimes find it a bit categorised. You know,
it is very categorised, and they're also kind of restricted because of what you said about the government and stuff.
Yeah.
Everything goes back to them. There is a lot of control, and they intend to maintain that control. Obviously, there's all the having the World Cup later on. That's raising a lot of issues.
And that's also raising a lot of, you know, it's a bit like when the Olympics happened in England. Suddenly it's go. You know, they kind of want to, you know, it's the same with the World Cup. They want everything finished by 22, is it? Yeah. But I thought it was interesting if you said. But I was thinking, it was interesting. I think the collaboration aspect of that project is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think because we live in England and I don't have a car. Actually, it's a lie. I have a van now. But anyway, I didn't have a car until very recently. You know, and I live in London, and it's so well connected. I'm like, oh come on, you know, you can just walk, or you can get.
Yeah, you can't walk.
You can't.
You don't walk anywhere.
Yeah, and also, it's really interesting working with collaborating with the girls, because they also have a bit of a reality check. They're like, well, no, they're like, no, where are we going to park? I'm like, no, it's fine, we'll walk. You know, so it's kind of interesting because you come up with your
contradiction.
Yeah, and the whole conversation, a lot of the discussions, we got on really well actually. But I think maybe the first 2 days was all about parking. The whole conversation was about parking. But it's a really, you know, how do you live in downtown without parking?
Every household has about like 5 cars.
Yeah.
And everyone drives out in their cars, so that is an issue. But
so I think with our kind of development of the downtown as well, it went down quite a lot to who's going to be the user. Because as Qataris, they were saying, I wouldn't live there, I want to live in my villa on the edge of town. So it's also thinking about almost like rebranding or rethinking this kind of downtown as a place maybe where it's more student living, or it's more kind of like international people coming to stay, but the whole idea of like the user and who would want to live there without having several stories of underground car parking is a real valid question. But how do you do that without sort of obliterating the whole site? And so So
there's also the whole, what's the word? Because they're very conservative, that's a big issue. So them, like Qatar opening up and trying to get more Western involvement, yet still maintaining their beliefs and whatnot. That is very difficult, and sometimes when people come from the outside and then come in, they don't always take that into consideration. And it's not necessarily only in like the Qataris' hands, but it's just that is kind of the way the whole system works there, and it does have to go through the government. Anything we do has to go through the government. Like it's not as easy as like, oh yeah, like just.
I just file a planning application. Yeah, because that system doesn't exist.
No.
Like, yeah, it's really. I mean, it's been a great opportunity for us as a really small practice, something to be exposed to these kind of questions and things, and kind of working with Fatima and Ala, and yeah, I mean, it's an amazing project. It's really great. It's really. I don't really know what the answer is to so many things, you know, because some of these buildings are not really that nice. Do you keep them or not? Or are you being precious? Or it's kind of.
I just noticed a familiar name on the booklet, which was Martial Echenike.
Oh yes, yeah.
And presumably he was, I don't know what his involvement was, maybe you mentioned anyway, but presumably he was pushing more of a spread out attitude to the project? Or what was his involvement?
So Martial Echenike, for those who don't know, he's a really well-known kind of urbanist and involved in like master planning in Barcelona and several kind of cities in South America. And he was actually used to be the head of Cambridge for a period, a professor at Cambridge, and he was one of the judges on the panel. And then subsequently as well, there's been like a urban pamphleteer booklet. There's been a publication about some of the work and some of these kind of debates, and he was contributing to that. That was the kind of page of the booklet. His approach, I mean, I guess our main kind of point was this kind of idea of working with the vernacular, or the kind of idea of the courtyard house at various scales, and this idea of having education as a catalyst. And I think he was actually really keen and really excited about this idea of education as a catalyst, as a kind of driver to reinvent a place. Because he said, and I quite agree, that it kind of needs something, some kind of insertion or something for it to kind of re-enliven. So he wasn't really that supportive. He was being quite critical of these kind of more satellite, which is quite interesting. Yeah. And there was also 5 proposals for the area from 5 different teams, and one of the teams was looking more like an artisan market, and one of the other teams was looking at like ridding the whole thing like courtyard. So it was kind of interesting to see and work with for the whole 2 weeks with the other teams and see what they were doing. And actually subsequently we've also formed like a London Doha collective, so it's kind of slightly ongoing that we kind of would like to collaborate more with each other. We're going to have an exhibition. Didn't happen too many things, but you know, it's quite interesting when you're working with other people. Yeah, there's kind of relations. It's quite intense, you know, 2 weeks in a place you don't know. So yeah, staying in the Hilton. British Council put us up in the Hilton, which was a bit weird. And actually quite interesting because, sorry, I'll finish in a minute. But it was quite interesting because we were spending all the time. You know, we're working till like midnight or something, like students again, going putting cameras in this kind of slum area, interviewing people, and then at the end of the day, we'd get a cab to this kind of redeveloped part of town, which is basically Jean Nouvel skyscrapers and various kind of like egos, you know, everywhere, with kind of yachts, and so it was quite an interesting thing. Every day we'd kind of like get our cab back to this kind of with a swimming pool and then go back, and so I mean, when we went back next time, we just stayed downtown, but it's actually quite an interesting thing to do, to kind of see the 2 parts. And Arla and Fatima, they'd never been to the site, which was quite interesting. You know, they'd never been there. They were like, oh, we're Qataris, lived our whole life, but we've never been to this area because why would we go? You know, we're women, it's mainly men, there's nothing here for us, so it's quite, and they found it was quite, their perception really changed about the area. They found that really interesting. Thank you.